Hi everyone, welcome back to Finished Vehicle Logistics North America. We're in the last session of the day, last session of the event, and what a journey it's been. We've been going to considerable detail into the disruptions facing the North American sector and market right now, with so many of them indeed in the supply chain, whether the limiting factor, many of them being the limiting factors in the sales recovery in the US, with low inventory, with supply chain bottlenecks, with price issues, visibility issues, driver shortages, a host of topics that we've covered in detail over the last 2 days, and yet with more with more to come in our session ahead. Really glad so many of you have taken the journey with us across the last 2 days, and we really value the solutions, insights from our many speakers, panelists, but also the comments, questions, interaction from the audience. And I hope you'll keep that going right through to this last session, because it's a good one, and we'll really be keen to take your feedback on it. I think this session, which we've titled Data-Driven Logistics, is a great culmination of what we've been talking about throughout this event, because almost every topic, one way or another, is coming back down to the data, whether that's trying to improve visibility, ETA, seeing better into the pipeline, geo-based production, optimization of networks. It's really key that we have the right data in the right place at the right time to analyze and understand. And that's a bit more what we're going to look at today. But before we kind of get into the details with our guests, I want to once again ask for your view, but we're going to do things a little bit differently for the poll this time. Again, if you look to the right of your screen, you'll notice it, and some of you are already in it. We're going to build a word cloud throughout this session, because hey, that word cloud might come up a few times in other contexts, actually. So the question is, please write the word or expression that best describes your company's priorities for finished vehicle logistics over the next 12 to 18 months. So it's no Q&A. There's no multiple choice. There's no poll. Write in whatever you want, although I do warn you, there is an AI-powered profanity filter here, so we will catch out some of anyone who has other priorities that they want to share. So keep it clean here, but nonetheless, let us know if you can write those in at any time now or during the session. We'll look back and have a sense of what's coming up, and I can already see a couple of things coming in there, which I think will indeed be important to our session here. So I'm really keen to get into the topics here. What we're going to do, we'll have insight. We have guests from ICL, from ProAct, two IT and software specialists, as well as Nissan. We're going to hear a bit from each in terms of data journeys that we see in vehicle logistics, in terms of ways to gather it, share it, store it, and analyze it. And from Nissan, we're going to have a bit of a case study overview of what's happening right now in terms of data transformation in the supply chain at Nissan. And then we're going to bring everyone together for an interactive Q&A, where again, I hope you'll get involved and put your questions through. So I'd first like to welcome our first guest, Frank Arusa, who's the Director of Production, Development, and Innovation at ICL, and he's leading ICL's data science team, assisting OEMs to solve problems with new technologies for a lower cost and fast turnaround. Been with the company 15 years, has previously worked on tracking software, and earlier as an engineer at Chrysler. So Frank, really pleased that you can join us today.
Thank you, Christopher. I really glad to be here. I'm glad. I appreciate the invite.
That's our pleasure. That's a pleasure. So there's a couple of slides. I just want to call them up now, Frank, and then ask you to tell us a little bit about how you see the data side, the journey for vehicle logistics. And as I mentioned, we'll come back to you for more Q&A after.
Sure. It's actually the next slide. There we go. So yeah, collecting and managing data is definitely the foundation of any logistics data plan. These days there's so much data around us and in so many formats that keeping it all straight and meaningful is no easy task. Whether the data comes in or is made manually, is in a standard file type that comes batched, or is some of the newer technologies such as API or web services, making sure that this data is accessible to all the systems, is clean, correct, and meaningful is key to any successful logistics plan. Here at ICL, our data is absolutely critical to vehicle visibility as well as our invoice audit systems. We're very dedicated to making sure that the data is processed quickly while maintaining the accuracy by putting it through as much automated validation as possible. Manual data, the least complex, is definitely the most antiquated form, but still at times, there's no way around using it. We have several web screens that still allow manual uploads of spreadsheets to assist in getting data into our systems easily. We definitely attempt to move anything manual to something automated as quickly as possible, but flexibility in being able to accept all data sources is the only way to paint a complete picture. Old school technology such as EDI, X12, or even flat files is a step above manual, but still hinders the limits of real-time processing. Many of the files we receive are down to every 15 minutes, so we have come a long way in improving visibility, but still this format still isn't quite the real-time transactions that we would prefer. What is nice about these types of files is that they have a very structured format, making them easy to define within a system and making it even easier to validate whether the data is following that format. The newest technology, such as APIs that brings data between systems when the other system demands it, is pushing towards that instantaneous feedback. And an API basically just allows one system to ask for and receive data from another exactly when it needs it. It sounds great, but there are some drawbacks as well, as the real-time nature of the data is still dependent on the underlying system's potential to actually get that data immediately. If a telematics unit only uploads the position every 30 minutes, you still have the same level or worse data accuracy as you do with the older technology. Not to mention, having so many different formats of APIs and whatnot makes maintaining the data an ever-changing process. The key to flexibility is having a data integration hub that will ingest and output data in any format and allow setup of that data within the system in days rather than weeks or months. This allows us to be in a position to upgrade our feeds instantly as data suppliers move from one level of the data complexity spectrum to the latest. And back to you, Chris.
Great, thank you, Frank. So I think that gives us a good starting point in terms of understanding, as you well put it, the different ways and formats for data and how that's going to evolve in the industry. So we're going to definitely pick up a few of those points back in the Q&A. But for now, I'm going to bid Frank a short farewell and introduce Paul Nurse, who is the CEO at Proact, a software solutions company focused on finished vehicle logistics, where Paul's responsible for product strategy and product evolution from the plant to dealer level. So Paul, I think you also have a short slide or two here that will help illustrate a bit what journey we're talking about here in terms of using data. So I'm going to pass it over to you before we go to Q&A.
Thanks. Good evening, everybody. Good morning. So I just want to start off with a brief introduction really to where we see the main challenges in terms of data management today. Firstly, there is a lot of data available. That's true, but generally what we don't do very well is capture and consolidate that data. There are many, as just described, there are many technical methods of how we receive data, how we go and get data, but more often than not, this can represent too much complexity or cost to a business versus the perceived benefit to that business. So there is a lot of data there, but there's a problem in how we get at that data today. Secondly, there are also a number of other data sources that we don't harness. The primary one being the vehicle itself. And you could say probably the most accurate source of data that we have in the finished vehicle supply chain. We've in fact long campaigned for OEMs to make that vehicle data available to the supply chain and allow service providers and stakeholders to leverage that data. This is happening, but maybe not at the pace that's really needed. I mean, we'd love to see that accelerated. And then thirdly, then this is, where we do have the data, where we can capture it, we then tend to go from a situation of not having data to then being overwhelmed by the amount of data that we end up with, how to harness it to good effect. And consequently, as you see in the next slide, the data becomes just noise. So we don't really know how to gain benefit, and more often than not, we just ultimately ignore that data. what is needed, therefore, is something that does that work for you. A technology that will take all of the available data, be that from the supply chain, be that from the vehicle itself, will analyze it, compare it to the processes, to the goals, to the objectives of that vehicle, of that supply chain, determine the consequence, determine the effect, and then feed that, send that feedback in real time in terms of instructions and data back into the supply chain, or even directly to instruct the vehicle itself. So kind of a real-time feedback loop. That's what we call, in product, that's what we call our control tower technology. So basically, it's like a vacuum cleaner for data, but once that data has been sucked up, the control tower sorts through it, compares it with the business objectives, acts on it immediately, and in real time sends back data, sends back instructions into that supply chain, or even in some cases, adjust or amend or change the business objective itself where it needs to. So a very automated, very intelligent, real-time data management environment. So in terms of looking at the data we have, in terms of the gaps in the data we need, without such a kind of a control tower technology, data will always just be noise. And therefore, we won't actually know where the gaps are in our data until we first understand and harness what we've already got today.
Great, Paul. Yeah, absolutely. I think you know, few in the industry would be noting, as you point out, that we lack data. You know, it's more how do we use it and understand it, and I think that's a great analogy and an illustration that you showed there. So, Paul, we're gonna say goodbye just for a short while and come back for the Q&A. But now I would like to bring on Steve Jernigan, who's Director for Finished Vehicle Logistics at Nissan North America, a role he took on in April 2020. A bit of an interesting time, I think, to take on the role. We can come on to that later. Oversees vehicle logistics, export, and supply chain management strategy, including taking a lead on supply chain management digitalization, as we'll soon hear. So, Steve, I've got some slides here for you as well, which are going to take us through some of the steps that Nissan's taking, as we see there, in digitalization, collaboration. Hand over to you, and then we'll come back for Q&A.
Thank you, Christopher. Really appreciate it, and obviously any opportunity to continue working in the industry is great. So thank you for the time. I want to go real quick, just kind of what is Nissan doing and where we're at. I know this is focused on finished vehicle logistics, but for us, this is the whole supply chain kind of strategy that we're embarking on. So next slide, please. So I broke it down into basically 5 areas of transformation that we're focused on. If you go to the far left, really the first one's on our management systems. You know, we have multiple systems in use now from various providers across our region, both US, Mexico, and Canada. So we're working on developing our in-house solutions for YMS, WMS, and TMS that allows us more customability, right? We can design it for our needs, manufacturer and customer, and then also allows more multiple systems use and better data and hopefully connected data. The next piece we're working on is workflow applications, right? So we have lots of access, lots of Excel databases and information out there, and they're all very independent, and getting data from them is very tough, and user interface is not so friendly. We're working on moving these applications into web-based systems, developing web-based applications. That way, as you see on the next tier there in data infrastructure, we do have our cloud where we're centralizing all the storage of our data. It's going to be our single source of truth. And with that, we'll be able to streamline the data extraction, and as we've talked about a lot here, really on the data sharing. So that's in the process now as we map our system management systems as well as our workflow apps. And the other key piece in transformation for us is talent development. Obviously, our roles are changing, right? We've always had our traditional supply chain analyst. You know, we're moving into BI analyst, business intelligence analyst, and we're starting to see roles in our organization around data scientists, as well as data engineers and insights analysts. So our skills are changing to be able to support this data infrastructure we're building. And obviously, in the last piece is really developing, using all these tools, our analytics and app deployment, right? So we're able to start using these tools and this data from the data lake to hopefully provide solutions and process improvements throughout our systems and our workflow apps moving forward. Next slide, please. So I've talked a little bit about kind of our journey as a whole for supply chain, and on the left side you see what we talked about from the Nissan data sources to our cloud journey, and then basically using analytics and visuals to help us manage the business. The other key piece that we focused on, you've heard a little bit about in some of the prior presentations, is really on the collaboration piece. I think there's lots of data out there, but for us, we only have a piece of the data, right? And I think, key for us is continuing to find ways to collaborate and share information, specific information, right, throughout our supply chain. And some examples could be, 3PL systems into our Snowflake or our cloud, allowing us to take that data and use it to help improve processes for both our customer and ourselves. Next slide, please. Just quickly, I want to just kind of highlight 2 examples of where we're collaborating with suppliers. First, on our inbound capacity side, we're working on kind of a digital twin of supply chain. I think, as you know, as we get data and you get the capabilities, you can start to model and hopefully identify predictive models that help you identify disruptions in your supply chain. If you look at this sample here, we're working on at the chart on the bottom right, you see the phase 1, which is kind of developing prediction based on our available data, right? We know our tier 1s, we know our plants, we know our carriers, and our suppliers from our tier 1. What we don't have, as you can see, is our tier 1s have tier 2 carriers and they have tier 2 suppliers. And guess what? Those tier 2 suppliers have tier N carriers and so on with tier N suppliers. So we need all the data throughout the supply chain to hopefully be able to build these modeling tools to help us understand when there may be a risk, and hopefully we can take that and apply it and hopefully minimize the impact of the supply chain. One of the other ones focused specifically on the outbound finished vehicle logistics side is a partnership we're working with Georgia Tech and a couple of our haul-away carriers. Obviously, everybody's very familiar with the haul-away industry and obviously the challenges with drivers and capacity and just getting the vehicles to the dealer quickly. So the teams worked with these partners to try to build a transit hub network, right? So we're using modeling data that we're getting from both our haul-away carriers and our partners, and using that data to model, routes that may improve driver work-life balance, as well as hopefully increase capacity. So right now we're just looking at, specific lanes. We've been working on this about 6 months, but as we continue to grow it, it could be exponential as you share information across suppliers and maybe even other OEMs in the future. And I believe that's the last slide. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I think, again, I appreciate you showed us the kind of SCM journey all together there. I mean, clearly, as you mentioned, we're focused on finished vehicle, but, you have to have that whole view. And the systems transformation is obviously only made more powerful the more sources of information we're able to feed into it, into the cloud. And what a great example there from Georgia Tech that Nissan is working with. So I think with that, I'd like to invite Paul and Frank also back into the conversation. Thanks again, gentlemen, and let's go through some Q&A. And I mean, what I want to kind of start with is kind of broad, but as Paul said, I mean, clearly there's so much data that's available. I mean, starting with you, Steve, now that you're looking much more detail here, what's the real key data for vehicle logistics that we need most, and sort of when and where and how much? Because I feel like, do we need to know where every car is exactly every second, every moment, or do we need to kind of filter this down a little bit more? Maybe we can start the discussion at that point. I'll turn to you, Steve, and then open it up.
I would say the data that we need is the data that serves our most pressing need, right? I think that changes in environments, but there's a world of infinite data out there, and I think that just collecting data to collect it or hoard it can be counterproductive. So I think the data that gives you the value to approach the problem or the issue you may have and solve it, that's what you go after, right? So if it's visibility for our vehicles, we want to find data that can help tell us where they are, right? Or if it's quality, right? We want to understand the data that can help show us where there's trends or information that provides us to be able to impact that with data. So I think it really comes down to the data that serves your most pressing need.
Frank, would you see it the same way? Do you have a different perspective on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Steve. To me, it really depends on what you're trying to do with that data, like Steve said. For example, getting location information is of utmost importance to visibility and timeliness. And of course, timeliness of that data is equally important. But if you're trying to understand the custodial transfer of a vehicle as it goes through the network, you may not need data as often, compared to tracking a vehicle for final mile delivery, where if you don't get a update every 5 minutes, you're not going to see the track that vehicle actually took. So it really depends on the use of the data, but in the end, timeliness and receiving and processing that data is always of utmost importance.
Great, and maybe Steve, if I look back again as that of the cloud journey that you're on in the supply chain there, and this overall picture. I mean, how would you break it down between some of the, let's say, the short-term goals you really want to achieve with this, and then looking a bit further out? What will some key milestones for you be?
I would probably short term say, obviously you've seen where we're at in our transformation, but really, proving the value of analytic data and technology to our leadership, right? I think that's something that we're continuing to do. Obviously, it requires funding, right, to build the architecture and to bring in the resources and develop our people. So balancing that and using investments to provide some results on high potential projects, right? So being able to show that with this investment, we are making some improvements. So in the short term, we're continuing to do that. We've had some wins on projects, and we continue to get the funding to continue to advance and develop what I talked about earlier. I think medium term is exactly creating the standards and the governance around our project implementation, our tool creation, and our data, our cloud management, and really solidifying that foundation. And then as well as educating all our employees, not just those that are going to be technical or analytical, but how can data really impact them and help them solve real world problems and improve their business. And then long term, I think our vision is to develop a data and analytics organization that's integrated into the business like any other function today. I think that's where we like to get to an end state.
I think I'd firstly ask maybe Paul or Frank to comment on your observation of that sort of the structure that Nissan is approaching now. I mean, is that something you see reflected in other OEMs? Is it similar or different? And maybe I'll start with you on that, Paul.
It's very similar to a lot of OEMs, but we tend to see it from both sides of the fence. We see it from the OEM point of view when we're working with OEMs, and we see it from the service provider view when we're working with service providers. And I think there needs to be maybe more of a discussion, a standardization. Well, I don't mean technical, but I mean more of a standardization of expectation across the industry, both with service providers, both with OEMs, because what's important to the OEM is maybe not so important to the service provider, and vice versa. I mean, there is a perception that when a new OEM or an OEM is dealing with a new service provider, or a service provider is dealing with a new OEM, there's this perception, feeling of reinventing the wheel every time we do this thing. We're doing the same thing and again, but it feels like reinventing the wheel. So I think across the industry, we should be having more discussion about what the expectation of all sides are in terms of data exchange, especially as we go forward into telematic data exchange and things like that. I think we need to set that expectation and standardize a little bit more in terms of what each party expects from each other across the whole supply chain.
Frank, I see you nodding head there. I mean, clearly the standards must be a key part of achieving what one of the things we're aiming on. What's your experience there? I mean, what as the industry, are we still caught between too many, like the kind of form that you were highlighting before?
Yeah, absolutely. Standardization's always been the biggest challenge, especially when you're sharing and exchanging data in general. As much as we want to be flexible, as I was mentioning, in accepting any type of data, having different formats between OEMs, having different goals between OEMs, right? It's having those metrics common with each other definitely would help the industry as a whole.
So Steve, I mean, I want to come on to that collaboration piece because it's important for you, but even in terms of let's say internally with Nissan, when you're talking about using APIs and microservices and cloud, is it a challenge in and of itself integrating that with other legacy systems as you go on this, and how are you kind of working through that, and then perhaps building from that to how we can plug in suppliers, providers, and well, even other OEMs to a certain extent.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a challenge, right? I mean, there's a lot of challenges with any new technologies and integration into existing systems. I would say our biggest challenge is, security and governance of data has always been a challenge when we start talking about sharing and collaboration. And then internally, some of our systems were implemented maybe 30, 40 years ago. So finding the right methods to really integrate those systems seamlessly is very challenging. We see a path where this works with using new technology and systems to sit on top of maybe legacy systems, and then also where we can use logic and process to help our business run well for many, many years. But I agree with you. I think as we continue to move forward, legacy systems, how do we integrate, how do we support, and then the key piece is security and data privacy when we start talking about collaboration and sharing across the platforms. And I think as cloud we've talked about, obviously it makes sharing very easy and automated, and really will move as much further along in collaboration as we all move forward.
Great, and a reminder to our audience just on that word cloud, if you want to write in your comments, well, obviously your questions as well, but also on our poll, our cloud poll, let us know what your top priority is for finished vehicle logistics over the next 12 to 18 months. There's definitely a trend around visibility. If I look at the cloud as it forms right now, some issues clearly around stability as well. So some form, but everyone's coming with slightly different bets. So let's get a few more votes and write in there as we go along. But just coming back onto the sort of data security and collaboration side of it. I mean, I wonder, Frank, maybe just to comment first in terms of when we see the potential, as Steve alludes to, of putting more of this data together and network and optimizing a network across OEMs, across this, what are some key approaches that should be kept in mind to ensure that security, both for the OEMs as well as there's probably other data protection issues as well. How do companies like ICL approach that?
Well, data security is always, especially, some of the systems that we have invoice information and stuff. So there's no doubt that getting the data into the wrong hands is of utmost importance. So governance from the standpoint of having many different levels, whether it's vendor specific, whether it's user roles are of critical importance in my mind whenever we're implementing anything that's going to be shared. I mean, it's great to have shared data, but in the end, if you don't have that governance, you're going to have data get into the wrong hands, and it's of critical importance to keep in mind when doing any type of data project, no doubt.
Absolutely. So we got an audience question here, actually, Steve, directed for Steve, and it's actually someone picking up on the fact, obviously, that you're going a bit more in-house with some of these systems. You mentioned WMS, YMS, and then to come TMS, just for example. So the question is, does Nissan prefer focus on systems development in-house for vehicle logistics, versus maybe what might be seen as other core areas of business? So maybe tell us a bit more about why that decision to go in-house with some of these systems.
So obviously we've got many systems and many partners. The ones we've chosen really comes down to the ability to customize it, right? I think we want the ability to customize both to our manufacturing or to our needs internally, as well as the ability to take that data and use that data to help drive improvements in our business, whether it's in the vehicle or the part. But it really comes down to really owning it, customizing it, and getting the data we want to be able to change a part of business or how we do something. So it's really focused around doing that. We still have partners. We still have many other systems throughout our operations, but we look at really our critical ones and really the ones that can impact our business. And when you talk about data, having that available data to really track quality on parts or inbound side, as well as potential TMS optimization, it really changes the landscape for us.
Great. Now, one of the things that's come up in a few of the early slides, both from Frank and Paul, was the telematics piece and how we can or potentially should use that from vehicles. Sorry to go right back to you, Steve, but I just want to hear your perspective before I ask Frank and Paul to comment a bit further. Is vehicle telematics tracking, is that increasingly a part of the piece for Nissan as well? Does it fit in potentially with other types of tracking and technology? And how might we see that developing in the coming years?
I think obviously telematics is still so early in its capabilities and standards. I think we've talked a lot about the standard ways we transfer files or information. I think that's still to be defined and is a challenge. I think there's the right technology for the right solution, right? I think we may have a mix as we continue to see improvements in telematics. I don't think we just take a technology and force it into the problem, right? It's what's the problem and what's the right solution from the technology side. Telematics, I think in the future will provide a lot of, semi-real time. We've talked about, right, depending on GPS or whatever it may communicate with the OEM or the provider. Some of the information you talk about today, whether it's RFID or others, they're usually triggered top of points, right? Something has to happen to trigger an event so it can communicate. So I think there's probably use cases for all. I think depending on the problem and what you want to do, I think the solution could look different. And as telematics advances, I think we'll continue to see changes in how it's utilized, and maybe some of these other RFIDs and other technologies may integrate.
Paul, obviously you mentioned that this is something Proact has been advocating for a while. Do you see it as something that can really start to replace some of the legacy, well, I'll call them legacy, but for lack of a better term, legacy tools that we're using to track?
I think certainly to a large extent. I mean, as I said earlier, the vehicle, I suppose you could look at as the one true source of data. What comes from the vehicle is essentially going to be the truth. I think that's important. I think it's important that we accelerate that the whole telematics availability. Not so much for today, but as we get into the future, as we think more about rather plant to dealer, more plant to consumer type logistics, as we get to the Amazon model of buying, all of those things. And as we do that, then we extend the scope of the supply chain, because now we have to get into aftermarket servicing and all the other things that go on that a dealer may have done in the past. Then I think vehicle telematics is critical to that kind of model, to the whole kind of circular economy type approach to vehicle utilization. Will it replace everything? Well, probably not. I mean, you can't get a GPS signal out of a vehicle when it's 12 decks down in a ro-ro carrier. You probably can't get a very good GPS position when it's on a rail car. So there are a lot of circumstances where you do have to rely on the carrying equipment, the vessel, the rail car, whatever it might be. So it won't remove all the other sources of data by any means, but it's certainly a strong sort of basis for vehicle data within the supply chain in the future.
And Frank, I mean, one of the things I think ICL has always been strong with is ETA side, integrating data to do that. Now, one on the telematics piece, I mean, do you see that as a game changer eventually in things like ETA, or in fact, are there other kind of ways we can improve the predictability without necessarily, just relying on technology like that?
Well, that question's like twofold. So first, as far as the telematics, in my mind, we were talking about the single source of truth. I agree 100%. A lot of times we'll get data from a yard or a truck carrier, and the yard exit says one date and time from the port and another date and time from the truck carrier. So what the telematics will do is basically allow us to compare those two and understand who's giving us the correct data. So as the data gets better in quality, there's no doubt that comes down to getting us more consistent data that we can rely on. And consistency, not only in data, but in operations, is key to any type of ETA accuracy. In my mind, you can't have accurate ETAs unless you know for sure that your operational consistency is there, especially in finished vehicle logistics.
That's a good point. And Steve, what about from the ETA side from Nissan? I mean, can you tell us a little bit about how you're managing that for your dealers and your carriers? I mean, I'm thinking especially at times like this, when again, as we've heard throughout the conference so often, how everyone's scrambling for every vehicle. So I can imagine those ETAs are even more important. So maybe you can tell us a little about that.
Yeah, I think we'd all love to have, I guess we coined it the Amazon world on visibility and predictability on a package arriving, but we still have a lot of opportunity. We do have route-based modeling, and if things run right, we know the lead times, we know the transit times. It really comes down to the abnormal events, right, that really drives probably a long tail and probably the most displeasure for our dealers. If there's a storm event or a quality event or some type of event that, makes the vehicle off the expected route, then identifying it early and quickly and being able to come in and take some type of action to keep it moving is where we really need to make a lot of improvement. The tails are really what we spend the time chasing, and often we don't find out quick enough. And unfortunately, they miss their delivery windows or the updates to the dealer. And as you know, with the inventory as low as it is, many of these units are even sold upstream now, right? Some of these are customer owned on the way to the dealership now. So it's an area we got to continue to focus on, and really on the tails as well.
Absolutely. So it was mentioned before around the collaboration has come up, and I think one of these things we probably agree with is that data analytics can clearly scale with more information. You can start getting into the realm of AI, and perhaps this is the direction the industry needs to go. Maybe start with you, Frank. I mean, how much collaboration do you currently see in the network, and what steps would you like to see for it to improve?
I get the sense that some carriers may feel that supplying too much data can leave them exposed to questions they may not want to answer. The key to collaboration, in my mind, is showing it how it's going to be win-win for everyone involved. If the accuracy of the upstream data can assist with planning for everyone, and you can show how to reduce costs for everyone, this will definitely improve collaboration. If I can provide accurate forecasts directly to a truck carrier's TMS and show how this will improve their ability to schedule loads, they may be more willing to provide me last mile vehicle data directly from their ELD unit. So that's what I think needs to happen, is showing that win-win opportunity to them in order to increase collaboration.
Would you add anything to that, Paul?
Not a great deal. I think Frank said it all there. I mean, it's about what each party has to gain, and there have to be benefits to both parties. As Frank said, you have to also be wary of what data you're sharing, how much data you need to share, what the purpose of that is, because as a service provider, inevitably, if you share too much detail, then you raise a lot of questions. So it's as with everything, it's about relationship. It's a relationship between the two parties, trust between the two parties about how that data is going to be used.
When we talk about a data analytics journey, I think it's often we talk about descriptive, predictive, prescriptive, and I'm wondering if there are any part of the vehicle logistics industry that really is at the predictive, prescriptive level yet. And because I think that's probably where we want to go. And I mean, I'll start with you there, Steve. I mean, clearly that's part of what we talked about, part of what we want to get to with feeding in more of that data through the systems you've outlined. But, where are the strengths that you see right now, and where might we focus more on some of them?
I would say we'd love to get to prescriptive, right? I think that's the journey we all hope to see in the future. We're working in that direction, obviously. I think, it's difficult deploying analytics and really getting to prescriptive analytics into the business. And it's even harder than we anticipated. But I think a couple of different points. I think you got to trust and build that trust that needs to get amongst our practitioners and our suppliers to provide, analytical solutions that are required that are very complex, and appear to be black box to the end user. So, someone who's been making these decisions for years isn't going to just decide, hey, this computer is telling me to do this. But it seems contrary to how they've done business in the past, right? I know I've argued with my GPS all the time, and at the end of the day, it's always right. So I think, that's part of the transformation. We do see some projects that are more prescriptive in nature on the horizon for network changes. Obviously, we've talked a little bit about the Georgia Tech. I think we're working on network optimization and really driver preferences and scheduling and routing. That's one that we're currently underway. And there's many more, I think, down the road that these solutions could model and tell us, really what to do and how to interact to provide the solution we're looking for.
Frank, what about you? I think you see it similarly. Are there areas for ICL where you're already optimizing on a higher level, on a more prescriptive level?
There definitely is. I mean, as much as we want to get to that prescriptive level, and as much as we're giving our systems the ability to make those recommendations, having reliable data upstream is key, and variability in that production process typically drives unpredictability downstream. Do we have examples? I would say we do. Several of our customers have moved from completely manually releasing their vehicles to allowing the system to release them based on solid business logic, right? In my mind, that's as prescriptive as it gets. If all these type of variables hold true, then go ahead and release it without any action from a person. And so several of our customers have implemented that, so that's one example of prescriptive analytics that we've definitely implemented with some customers.
Great. And Paul, any further examples you'd be keen to point to?
Well, within our control tower solution, that's what we're trying to do. I guess we're somewhere between, I suppose, predictive and prescriptive. But rather than sort of the analytics, what we're focused on is that real-time interpretation of data, what we showed in the early slides, where we take data in real time from the supply chain, we compare it to the objectives, to the processes that have been defined, and then make decisions, and then feed that decision right back into the supply chain. So it's not a retrospective analytics; it's a real time decision making type environment. That's our focus within the supply chain, is that execution layer. We can then do retrospective analytics afterwards based on the decisions and the data that we had. But as I said right at the beginning, unless you have that control tower technology that can take all of this data in from many different sources and then bring it together to one unit of meaning, then you can't do the analytics. You can't do any of those things without doing that first.
But one of the areas that seems, I suppose, rife for this sort of analysis is in things like damage reporting and perhaps towards prevention of damage, and then even maybe to help reduce insurance. And obviously in the consumer area, we're moving towards things like telematics-based insurance and all the kinds of opportunities which technology can bring into that. I just wondered if amongst the systems and innovations we're talking about, if that side is a key focus too. And I might start with you there, Steve, in terms of how that picture might fit into some of the systems outlines that you gave us previously.
It definitely is. Our process partner also is working on their transformation in cloud, and we're actually able to start pulling information around damage down to the model, the location on the truck, or the location of the incident, where it's at, and start to use all this data to understand, was it a design, is it the dimensions, so we can really start to drill down and get data that we never really were able to drill down to, and use that to hopefully make changes. So yes, we're starting to look at it. We're starting to be able to see trends or drill it down into specific locations or regions, and even to specific models. So we'll continue to do this. We're in our early stages now, but I think we'll continue to see improvements and hopefully drive improved quality to our customers at the end of the day.
Is this an area of focus for you as well, Frank?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually do currently have a customer where I think it's more descriptive right now, but definitely we currently have a customer where we're collecting damage data throughout their network, whether it's the inspection companies, the truck carriers, and yards, and they have business analytic dashboards of exactly the type of criteria that, like Steve was saying, where the damage occurred, what mode. And they use standard codes, so AIAG has standard codes that those are the codes that we collect from that damage. So we know exactly the severity of the damage. Is it commercially acceptable? Is it not? So we track where it's first reported as well, because that's key, because you don't want the same damage that's reported 3 times during the network. You need to know where it started. So we have flags and whatnot that tell us exactly the first time that damage was reported, where it was. So we're looking, and with that same customer, we're actually looking to connect to their damage claim system, and hopefully at some point that becomes prescriptive as well. Once you trust that, okay, this is the damage that it was, can that system now actually create the repair order for that vehicle, depending on the data that we have? So yeah, we're definitely looking into that, and I think that's would be a great optimization for all of our customers.
Great. Well, we're starting to move towards the end. So one of the things I want to just make sure we take away from everyone is, some of the really low hanging fruit that we can focus on. Not that we should just focus on that, but kind of action points, if you like, that give us a point at which when we connect again, hopefully in person in 6 months or less, when we hold the next event, actually less than 6 months, we maybe could already address whether we're making progress on. And Steve, you've touched upon some of it, but maybe I'll just ask you to kick us off there. The low-hanging fruit, the biggest opportunities, if you like, that we can approach from data for the North American vehicle logistics market network.
So I think, for us, if I'm just looking at finished vehicle logistics, optimization probably in our haulaway market, I think is where there's a lot of opportunity to use data to really collaborate with other haulaway providers and other OEMs to really change the way we deliver vehicles and probably the traditional method we use now. Just in our use study with our providers in Georgia Tech, we've been able to find a route improvement of 25% capacity just on using data, right, and some of the connection. Just imagine the opportunity if we can collaborate across the OEMs as well as other providers to really utilize equipment to the fullest and hopefully change the work-life balance and for our drivers. So I think that's one area that's huge that we can see a lot of opportunity.
And what a relevant one, especially at this time, as we've talked about so often with the shortages, and it's really critical. Not something that's going away anytime soon, even as the chip shortage may get sorted. Paul, I'm going to turn to you next.
I think I might have mentioned it once or twice before, but vehicle telematics is something that we're going to be continuing to champion going forward. I think the potential benefits are pretty huge to the supply chain, and more so when we look at the sort of the need for the more factory to consumer type supply chain, which we're certainly more involved in these days. That there are other things that need to happen to get to sort of the so-called Amazon model, if you like. There needs to be a shortening of lead times in the overall finished vehicle supply chain, and obviously, again, with the whole sort of factory to consumer type environment, then as I said, we get more into this sort of circular economy, and that all of those things require different data. So there's two phases here. One is to deal with the data that we already have in the supply chain, that in many cases we've had for many years, but not yet really effectively harnessed that data. So that's kind of phase one. And then phase two then is defining and establishing the data that we need for the future finished vehicle supply chain as well. That's really our focus in what we're doing at ProAct.
Thanks, Paul. And Frank?
I honestly, I think the biggest opportunities that we have with to optimize the network through the data that we have is really predicting bottlenecks, right? So knowing the variables to concentrate on to give us that data, and then sharing that information with all the correct parties would go a long way to optimization. For example, like vehicle dwell time at a yard may inherently depend on like the current entire quantity of vehicles at that yard and what capacity there is to remove those vehicles. Yet most modeling excludes that type of variable from the prediction. So I think it's getting an understanding of what other variables are out there that could actually give us a lot more information that we realize will go a long way in predicting bottlenecks, which will ultimately optimize our networks.
Right, all key good points, I think, that we can address as a sector. And just for my last question, it's a bit more looking further out. So in terms of your vision for a truly data-driven vehicle logistics supply chain, I don't think we can just outline it. I need you to outline it in about 30 seconds each, which is more than enough time, I think. I guess it's that in a snapshot, what you hope really can emerge from this approach in future, whether that's instant ETA or fully connected, predictive, prescriptive, etc. I'm going to go back to you, Frank, to kick us off on that one, looking out forward at your vision.
Sure. I think, like I said, my vision is that we were able to predict and prescribe changes throughout the network based on simulation modeling with different volumes, different costs, and updating that data real time so that the picture at all times reflects complete optimization of all those variables. So having a good visibility picture with little to no black holes has been the difficult part. Now that we have that with most of our networks, getting people out of just using that descriptive information and stepping up to trusting those models is going to drive the significant improvements that we need for our supply chain.
Paul?
I guess as a consumer, my vision is to be able to go onto a vehicle site, and in the same way as Amazon, to be able to order a vehicle and have that vehicle arrive in a number of days. Now, that's a big vision, but that's where the market needs to be, and that's what the expectation is into the future. Now, that involves a lot of people. It involves the manufacturers changing production methods, changing the locations of factories, changing the way we manage inventory, changing the whole way we sell and buy vehicles. It requires the service providers and carriers to change the way they move vehicles and handle vehicles. It's a huge amount of change, but that's, for me, that's the vision. That's where we need to be. And there are a lot of new companies coming along today that certainly have that same vision as well.
Absolutely. So that's a very forward-looking sense there, but in many ways, what we experience in so many other parts of our lives as consumers as well. So no reason why we don't think that the automotive industry moves in that direction. Steve, I want to ask you to conclude with your vision of a data-driven vehicle logistics future.
Yeah, I completely agree with a lot of the prior comments, but I think for me, it's really one where data sharing and the physical internet are really standard practice, right? So we use data to make decision-based decisions, and then it's the only way we manage our supply chain, right? And our processes become highly automated, and it really allows our employees to focus on exception handling and problem solving. I think we all have the same goal in mind, which is deliver the highest possible customer service and quality at the lowest possible cost. And I think we can do that with collaboration and really moving into the next phase of data in the cloud.
Absolutely. Well. On that note, gentlemen, I want to thank you all for your input and your time and your insight and sharing this with me today and with our audience here in the North American vehicle logistics market, and indeed our global audience, as this session will be made available on demand too. Fantastic insights. Really appreciate it. Thanks to you all. And wish you a good rest of the day. So I'm going to say goodbye to our guests now, and thank as well to all of our speakers and experts over the last 2 days. An intense round of insight and sharing in the spirit, I think, of collaboration that so many in the sector are calling out for and wanting. As we close the event, I'd like to pop back onto the screen, if I can pull them away from the football, Rich Logan and Nimish Ladwa. Gents, good to have you back. So we're nearly at the end. So besides the beer, which I'm sure is cooling, chilling, probably just at a camera view, what have you enjoyed most or excites you most about what you've heard? And as we go kind of ahead, Rich, I'm going to start with you. Rich, don't know. We can't hear you. I'm not sure if. Let's go to Nimish just whilst. Can I hear Nimish?
Thanks, Chris. I guess you can hear me okay.
I can, yeah. So we'll sort out Rich's sound in the background.
Yeah, no problem. That's all good. I think. Well, yeah. I mean, it's been a crazy couple of days. Thanks to everyone for joining in and being part of this. I think there's been some tremendous highlights, as you said. I mean, lots of changes happening in the industry. People transforming, as we just heard about, the data-driven logistics is driving things forward. That drive towards sustainability, and really is that recoding of logistics. I think that's really the important factor here, and of course underlined by the need to drive sustainability and keep that at front of mind when planning all these logistics and the whole transformation that's happening as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not a new word to come out, but I think it always comes in different contexts and applications. And maybe in the past we talked more about sharing physical assets and the need to reduce those empty miles, which obviously still applies as much as anything. But I think what this event and obviously the discussions going alongside continue to show us is the scale, the power of scale when we put that together and overlay networks and focus less on one asset, but seeing the whole view, and particularly what it can mean for things like, as Steve was talking about, driver routes and quality of life, and inevitably that's what's going to actually keep those drivers in this sector. Because for whatever we might talk about in the future for autonomous trucks, I don't think it came up once in this event because nobody thinks that's a solution anytime soon. They gotta make it better for the drivers and the carriers who are supporting this. Rich, hopefully we can hear you now.
Yeah, or maybe it's a blessing in disguise that you can't. Clearly, the AI we have working here has had enough of me and my waffle over the last 2 days. Just want to say a huge thanks to everyone who's collaborated. It's been a real pleasure, real honor to pick the brains of the industry's leaders, experts, and innovators, and hear their views. Couple of things for me. I'm sure Nimish picked up on a couple of these points as well as I was just off stage. It seems that a number of the challenges and issues that the industry faces right now, the easy option is to put more trucks on the road, and that's clearly not the solution. So what's been fascinating is to hear how people are collaborating and thinking differently outside the box, with a view of sustainability, with a view of actually reducing those miles and coming up with alternative solutions. But we know with the likes of heavier vehicles, and bigger, larger total addressable markets from dealers who are looking to utilize technology to increase their market size geographically, this is going to become a challenge. So we have to think outside the box, and there's been some great insights as to how we can do that. And so I think over the coming 6 months, years, we should start to see some real progression on that front. The other key point from my side is just how customer expectation and behavior is really driving investment, innovation, and kind of forward thinking in finished vehicle logistics. So those investments are taking place, and that's just to maintain and meet the expectations of the customer, which is evolving and has done so over the last year quite dramatically.
Very well said, both of you, and I think that point on innovation. I mean, I think for the years we've run this event and of course covered finished vehicle logistics, it's often been said that the sector lags behind, and we're still honest, and I think it was Michael D'Angelo who mentioned the laggards in the sector, and the sector still being something of a laggard, and I don't think we can deny where it is, but nonetheless the progress that has been made, and I think there were lots of great examples of both practical things which are in place, whether that's new asset tracking technology, whether that's systems that help optimize, or perhaps most inspiring in ways of those willingness, as you said, Rich, to try something new, whether it's something simple or whether it's that moved the physical internet. Which maybe we heard theoretically about at previous events and previous reports, but now we kind of see it coming into action and really into play, and that's super exciting. And there's going to be a lot more of that where it comes from, and we're going to be sure to be covering it at Automotive Logistics across our website. Great content, which I hope you'll continue to keep up with. If you're not already, as you follow this event, go onto our site, because There's already stories coming out, which our editorial team are putting out, led by Marcus Williams. So you can catch up on more of the content there, along with a lot of other great content to come. Shortly, in a few weeks, we'll have our latest digital edition with a special focus on finished vehicle ports in North America, with our annual ranking, and then some deep dive analysis of what's happening in the sector there. A lot of which, of course, we'll touch upon what we talked of here. So keep up with that on all fronts and on newsletter, as well as our ongoing research reports. If you can find online, we've got a new report on the battery supply chain, looking real deep dive upstream, downstream, into lithium, into production issues, new gigafactories coming online and forecasted. In fact, if you go onto our booth at this event, you can download a copy available of that report, as well as from our site, and a lot more. And of course, events, online, in person, hybrid, however we can get them to you, you can be sure we'll get them to you. So, I mentioned this a few times. Neemish and Rich have mentioned it a few times. We're really thrilled to be on these platforms, connecting with you, and don't expect that to stop, because we love the interaction, we love the matchmaking, we love the ability to reach more people and to connect more people. But we also do love connecting with you, as we know you do as well, and that's why we are planning. If I can just pull up a slide quickly, we are planning the return to a physical event in Detroit in October, with our Automotive Logistics and Supply Chain Global Live event. We're super excited about that, and look at many ways that we can, continue the digital connectivity beyond the physical event too as well. But get in touch with our team, follow up on the site. We'll have more to come soon on that very exciting event, and of course as well the physical iteration of this event too, with Finished Vehicle Logistics North America back in California, planned for November 2021, with all lots of more great content to pick up from where we are, what we discussed today over the last 2 days, and indeed the connections that we want to bring forward physically as well as digitally as well. That's it from us. Thanks again for being with us. A quick reminder for anyone still with us: all of the content from the sessions the last 2 days available on demand on the platform for the rest of the month, exclusively for delegates here. So don't miss that, and you can download all of the event session slides right from those on-demand links as well as continue to network here, set up meetings, and connect with your peers through June 28th. So this platform is open. Use it. Check out the resources, and like I said, take advantage of all that great insight that we have available for you, and as well from our great sponsors and exhibitors. So please take some time to go through that, visit them, connect with them, and we look forward to meeting you online here and meeting you in person soon, as well as on the pages of our site. So thanks again from us at Automotive Logistics, and we'll see you again real soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
What do nearly half of new vehicles sold in North America have in common? They arrived with the help of ICL. ICL Systems provides a fully managed, web-native solution that gives auto manufacturers end-to-end visibility of their finished vehicle supply chain, from manufacturing plant to dealership, and everywhere in between. Managing communication with multiple trading partners is costly and complex. With ICL, OEMs can connect with all of their supply chain partners in one place. Tracking begins when a production order is placed, continues through all modes of transport, and every step along the way, with updates about pre-delivery inspections, dealer trades, dwell time, order status, and more. ETA to final delivery is continuously updated and shared with supply chain partners and stakeholders. And our invoice audit system ensures OEMs pay for the right work, at the right time, at the right rate, to the right vendor. Ready to maximize performance, savings, reliability, and efficiency? Contact ICL today.
Horizon Auto Logistics is your automotive terminal, processor and logistics operator for finished vehicles and equipment. We are dedicated in providing a variety of professional, technical and value-added services within the automotive logistics industry. Inside the port, we handle vessel discharging or loading. We stage cars inside the port and then shuttle the cars to the final automotive yard.
Our Puente Villarrica yard is 15 kilometers away from the port. It has 106 acres of available land and can handle an annual throughput of about 500,000 cars.
The Vehicle Processing Center is really the heart of our operation. This particular one is being built out to 3,000 square meters.
Here in Mexico, we have a fleet of 40 dedicated equipment and can scale the capacity much beyond this number if required. Horizon Auto Logistics. Innovation through foresight.